Earlier in the children's time video, we heard how Joseph was a victim in this story. Terrible, unfair things happened to this man. Now, in the last video with me talking, we heard how Joseph became the hero, interpreting dreams and rising to power in the government. But now, as the story keeps turning, we hear how Joseph becomes the villain. And if you have heard me preach before, chances are you have heard me say that nobody is ever just a victim or a hero or a villain. We're all three. And Joseph proves this exactly. So we left off with Joseph being in charge of all the food for all the world. And this is when his brothers come to him seeking grain. In a theatrical twist, Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. So Joseph runs a series of cons on his own family. He first accuses his brothers of being spies and has them thrown into prison. He holds one of them hostage while sending the others to return with their youngest brother. And later he plants a silver cup in his youngest brother's luggage and then accuses them of stealing it. Joseph does not take the opportunity to relieve his father's anguish. And while he has many chances to tell his brothers that he knows who they are and he knows what they've done, instead, he chooses to keep on messing with them. On the one hand, Joseph is undeniably cruel to his family. But on the other hand, even in the middle of all these tricks, Joseph's heart is moved by compassion. And if you're reading this for yourself, all through these episodes, if you can't quite decide whether Joseph is supposed to be the bad guy or the good guy, me neither. I think that actually might be the whole point. One of Joseph's brothers comes and stands before him and explains how their father Jacob is deep in grief. And that is what does Joseph in. So at this time, I will be reading Genesis 45, verses 1 through 15, and then jumping back in for verses 25 through 28. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers couldn't even answer him. They were so dismayed at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks and herds and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here." Then Joseph fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, while Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked to him. And I'll be jumping ahead to verse 25. So they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they told him, "Joseph is still alive. He is even ruler over all the land of Egypt." And he was stunned. He couldn't even believe them. But when they told him all the words that Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel said, "Enough! My son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die." It's getting good. And so it is. This shining story of God's power in all the world spills into the story of a family broken by grief. We know about grief. These days, our own families are grieving. Our own hearts are grieving. Even our church is grieving. We are missing each other and we are missing God. And it could be that the longing we are feeling is like an open wound. I can tell you for sure, God is also longing for us. All through the story of Joseph, we have been paying attention to God's power. We've been looking for it, not just in the thundering mountains or in the halls of government, but what if God's power is in the dreaming and the remembering, the recognizing and the repenting? What if God's power is in the holy grief we are holding in our hearts? Way back in the first video, I encouraged all of us to allow the unfolding of the story to illuminate one word that names something of God's power. So maybe throughout this church service, you found a word and you wrote it down. And if you did this, or if you still might, the next thing is I invite you to share your word with someone who needs to hear it. It could be somebody in the church needs a card from you, or a phone call, or a text message. And maybe the word that you found in the worship service today, this word that describes God's power, is precisely the word that they need to hear. I will invite, if you are on Facebook, would you consider commenting on today's post with your word? So if you found the service link in the post on Facebook, just in the comments, go ahead and drop your word. Sean Thomas Doherty says this: "Why bother? Because right now there is someone out there with a wound in the exact shape of your words. May these words of God's power be our offering. May it be so."